Thank you so much for watching Landumc Goes There. Please subscribe and hit the like button and the bell notification button. The Munsters premiered on September 24th, 1964, and it was an immediate rating success. The wacky antics of childlike patriarch Herman and his unusual but not really scary family originally ran for 2 seasons, a total of 70 episodes. But it's remained on the air ever since in some form of syndicated showing. The show stars Fred Gwynne as the Frankensteinish monster and the head of the household, Herman Munster, Yvonne De Carlo as his vampire wife, Lily, Al Lewis as Grandpa, the aged vampire, Beverly Owen, who was later replaced by Pat Priest as their niece, Maryland, and Butch Patrick as their werewolf-like son, Eddie. The premise for the show is that the Munsters are a Transylvanian American family living at 1313 Mockingbird Lane in the fictional city of Mockingbird Heights. The show's running gag is that the odd-looking family with strange taste consider itself to be an average American family. The series was created by the same team behind Leave It to Beaver. Joe Conley and Bob Mosher were producing and writing for the classic family sitcom Leave It to Beaver, where they ended up writing what they knew. Between them, they had 6 children, and they based a lot of their plots on their own home lives. They used this same philosophy when they created a sitcom about a suburban blue-collar family that just happened to be comprised of monsters. They didn't want children to be frightened of the characters, so they made Herman a typical working dad who carried a lunchbox to work every day and who imparted homespun wisdom to his young son. The mother was caring and nurturing, even if she did serve rolled hyena foot roast for dinner, and an aging grandparent who had a laboratory in the dungeon lived with the family too. All in all, it was a nice slice of down-home Americana. The choice of monster characters was strictly intentional and royalty-free. Universal Studios owned Universal Television, which owned the Munsters, and they also owned most of the copyrights for all the classic monsters, including Dracula, Wolfman, and the Frankenstein monster. The studio had been running their old classic horror films on television since the 1950s, and they found that there was still a very impressive audience for this type of film decades later. When they pitched the idea of the series to the studio, CBS executives knew that they had one advantage that ABC lacked with the Addams Family, which was its competitor, and that was the ability to use Universal's monster characters. This show regularly topped the Addams Family in the ratings, mainly because of the instant identifiability of the characters. The role of Maryland was played by 2 different actresses. But in this case, it wasn't that she got fired. It was her decision to quit the show. The New York-based Beverly Owen played Maryland for the first 13 episodes, but she was desperately unhappy working in California because she missed her fiancé, who was back on the East Coast. Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis intervened on her behalf, and they talked to the producers to get her released from her contract. She went home, got married, and eventually got a role on the soap opera Another World, which was filmed in New York and not California. The girl that replaced her was Pat Priest, and she got that role in part because of her size. Not only was she blonde, because the brunette Owen had worn a wig as she played the role of Maryland, but Priest was the same height and almost exactly the same measurements as the first Maryland. This meant that all the existing Maryland costumes and accessories fit her perfectly, so there was no need to spend money on replacement wardrobes once she was hired. even though Fred Gwynne would eventually reminisce about the fact that Herman was one of his favorite characters that he ever played. He was often fairly miserable during all the shootings for the show because of all the various devices that were necessary to transform him into the lovable Frankenstein monster. On his feet, he wore asphalt pavers boots with 4-inch soles. His thighs, arms, and torso were covered in 40 pounds of foam rubber padding. This caused him to contend with constant back pain because of carrying the extra weight and the limited flexibility that he had wearing the shoes. His wife, Lily, was originally named Phoebe, and she was also played by a totally different actress. In the unaired pilot, Miss Munster was played by Joan Marshall. But when the show was picked up as a series, CBS brass worried that Marshall's look and on-screen demeanor were too similar to Carolyn Jones's portrayal of Morticia Addams on the rival network ABC. They then decided to recast the role, and along with the new actress came a totally new name for that character. Now, that new Lily wasn't exactly welcomed by her co-stars at the beginning. Fred Gwynne and Al Lewis weren't pleased at all when they heard that Yvonne De Carlo had been hired to replace Joan Marshall. They had never met the film actress, but they were intimidated by her reputation as a Hollywood glamour queen. Her husband had become permanently disabled. You see, he was a stuntman that was working on How the West Was Won from 1963. He eventually lost a leg from an injury that he received during that filming. De Carlo ended up taking over the household. She had to do everything. She was the sole breadwinner, and she took almost any job that was presented to her. In 1964, she was heavily in debt, and when she was offered the role as Lily, she didn't want to do it. She felt it somewhat beneath her, but she had to put all that behind her because she had to provide for her family, and that's just what she did. People wondered how this glamorous actress could succeed as a ghoulish matriarch of a haunted house. She said she was able to do it because she followed the directions that they gave her on set. They told her to play the role like she was Donna Reed, and that's what she did. Nowadays, you can't imagine that role being played by anyone else. Playing it gained her a younger audience, and it also gave her a steady paycheck. Take a look back at this fascinating, fun series from the 60s. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.